What if behaviour that challenges is actually a cry for help? Let's unpack that. If you are caring for someone else, whether paid or unpaid, and no matter how many hours you do it, did you realise that you may be missing out on thousands of pounds of discounts for things that you may use every day? The Able to Care podcast is proud to be sponsored by the UK's #1 carers card. Started by two best friends who recognise that carers deserve better and are 100% committed to helping to change the lives of all carers and bringing them together as a strong community. Carers Card UK provides support, recognition and rewards. It offers reassurance by providing an ID card that helps access emergency information when needed, while also unlocking discounts, a wellbeing hub, a carers circle tool and a community through their app. All of this for less than the price of a box of chocolates a year. There are discounts on gym membership, days out, electrical goods, clothing and even glasses. Let others know you care while taking a little care of yourself with an ID card you can be proud of. Visit carerscarduk.co.uk/promo code/able to care today to order yours. One of the early exercises I tend to do on a training course is to ask the group what behaviour do they find difficult and challenging. And quite often I tend to summarise that the majority of the behaviours that they list is actually caused by emotional dysregulation, an individual's inability to either manage or cope or regulate their emotions. So they're distressed. This is a common cause of the behaviour we encounter. Now, when we're looking at that distressed behaviours, some of you may have heard of what we call fight or flight before. Okay, this is where what's called our sympathetic nervous system goes into survival state, and our fight and flight is obviously an adaptive strategy for survival as far as it makes us faster, stronger, anaesthetised to pain. If we get cut, we lose less blood. It's there to help us to win wars and to cope with predators. There's also two other survival responses, which is freeze and fawn. Freeze being sort of disassociation and shut down, the scared stiff kind of principle, so playing dead. And then we've also got the fawn, which is being submissive, going and a bit like a dog dropping themselves on the floor or dropping their fronts down to show that they are submissive and passive and they mean no harm. So we've got rest and digest, and then we've got fight or flight, but then there is also freeze and fawn. Okay, so if I do a very simple kind of premise, you imagine if you take your hand and you just clench your fist with your thumb on the inside of your fingers. So the wrist represents your brainstem. The thumb represents what's called the amygdala. And then your outer cortex, and your cortex is represented by your fingers. And at the front of this brain that you've now created, if you look at your own fist, the fingers are at the front. They represent the frontal lobe, the conductor to your orchestra, the bit that allows you to evaluate information and process it. Okay. So when information comes in, enters through the brainstem or comes in through your external sensory information, everything you see, smell, feel and hear, the first place it goes to is to the thumb, the amygdala. And basically the amygdala goes, is this dangerous or not? Do we need to prepare ourselves to either fight, flight, freeze or fawn? We know it goes there first because that's why your best friend or your partner can potentially make you jump, because they sneak up behind you and go boo, and your brain goes, something you weren't expected to be there. Could be dangerous, prepare. And therefore, the alarm bell, the thumb starts to be activated to go, and we do the flinch response. However, the information then goes to where our fingers are, the conductor to our orchestra, that goes, wait, you know this person, they're not actually dangerous. You don't need to smack them or run out the room, or hopefully you don't smack your partner and run out the room when they make you jump, okay? If, however, what information comes through hits that alarm bell and is perceived as dangerous, and the conductor to the orchestra agrees and goes, yes, this is dangerous, that's going to then cause the alarm bell to go off and the lid kind of blows, and that's where our fight, flight, our freeze or our fawn all kick into play. So it's really useful to understand that what we call amygdala hijacking, where the amygdala kind of takes over the brain and sets us into our survival state. Now, many of you out there may have heard the term trauma-informed. Now, what we're looking at is related to trauma-informed is something that is not the lion in the room that's causing that alarm bell to go off. it's a lion they've experienced and encountered in the past that causes that alarm bell to go off. Now, let me explain a little bit further. Let's say that something happened to you in a green room yesterday that wasn't nice. It wasn't awful, but it just wasn't nice. It was a potentially dangerous situation. You may the next day then walk into a green room and go, oh, that reminds me of yesterday. This makes me feel a little uncomfortable. But your rational brain goes, different room, different day, different situation. This may all be semi-subconscious, but as far as it wasn't the green that hurt you, but there's a symbology there of a green room hurt you yesterday, but it wasn't too bad. You coped, so you were able to kind of self-manage. A good example of that could be like a bump at the traffic lights in your car, where you then the next day, you're kind of, you get in the car and just feel a little bit anxious, okay? But your brain goes, different car, different day, I know I can cope with this, fine. If, however, whatever happened wasn't just nice, it was something that you perceived as life-threatening to you or somebody else, and you were unable to do anything about it, you were unable to control that, you felt helpless in that situation. That may mean then that the emotional memory is stored within that amygdala. The alarm bell went off, you were in a dangerous situation, you weren't able to escape it or fight it, you may feel helpless, so therefore you were kind of left with this. If you think about the alarm bell going off is your fight or flight, but somebody holding the hammer is your freeze and fawn kind of responses. Unfortunately, that can mean you walk into a green room the following day and suddenly, boom, the whole fight or flight, the whole sympathetic nervous system or parasympathetic nervous system kick in as far as fight, flight, freeze, fawn, all happening in that moment. Now, suddenly the rational's gone out the window. The lid has now blown. The conductor is no longer involved. Now, it wasn't the green. If we go think about whatever happened in that green room was something life-threatening to you or somebody else. It wasn't the green that hurt you, but something about the green comes in through your senses and causes that alarm bell to go off just like it would have done the day before. You haven't processed that emotional memory in a typical way. Now, even though that green isn't what's going to hurt you, it triggers that fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. And this is what we refer to as the kind of the trauma-informed response. Another wonderful example of this is referring to what's called the invisible lion. And it's an author, and I will have to try and find the details and add them to the show notes. But I think it's called The Invisible Lion is the name of his book. And I want to say his name is Ben. You imagine a square. And in that square, on one side of the square is an arrow entering in as far as the rational part of the situation. So let's say I'm on a night out and I see my partner talking to somebody else, okay? Now, on a scale of 1 to 10, is that a threat to my well-being? Well, rationally, you might say, no. You don't know whether that person is a man trying to steal her away, or whether it's just a cousin or a friend, or, you can trust her, whatever it is. So therefore, rationally, it's probably coming in on a scale of 1 to 10 as far as threat response is concerned, threat to my well-being as maybe like a 1, okay? Very low risk. However, if I've experienced being cheated on, being left, experienced rejection, maybe it's been from situations related to her, but it might have been nothing to do with her. It could have been previous partners who've upset me or left me or rejected me or cheated on me or whatever. So unfortunately, as that information enters that box, it then goes in and hits my baggage. Now, that baggage could be low level. It could be just nice things that have happened. But what if it was something potentially traumatic and life-threatening? Suddenly, even though rationally the threat level is only a 1 coming in, because of the baggage it hits, suddenly out the other side, we're getting a 6, 7 as far as an emotional reaction. Rationally, something is low level. It's not really a threat. You're being ridiculous, but your emotional brain is trying to hijack based on fears, insecurities, the irrational sense. And you're wrestling with yourself to kind of regulate that and to cope with that. So, and that can be for any of us in any situation. Now, you imagine when it's a case of related to trauma, though, something that was genuinely life-threatening. Let's say I'm supporting somebody who's experienced domestic abuse, for instance, a child who's witnessed domestic abuse early in life, okay? And I just shout up the stairs like tea's ready, but I shout. Now, on a scale of 1 to 10, is me shouting up the stairs tea's ready a potential threat to their well-being? No, I mean them no harm. I'm not going to hurt them. I'm not going to hit them or anything like that. I'm only shouting them to let them know I'm at tea. But imagine that enters the situation, enters that box, and unfortunately their previous experiences of adult shouting has potentially been dangerous and life-threatening. Well, suddenly, even though logically it's coming in as a 1 or a 2 as far as risk's concerned, I'm not going to do anything, coming out the other side is a 6 or a 7. This person means me harm. Just like the green room, it's not that it is actually a threat. It's a perceived threat. The brain goes danger and hijacks the system, causes that alarm bell to go off and hijack the rational. So suddenly, and I'll put it in the phrasing that obviously I know many of you listening know I would never use, this kid that I just shouted upstairs, tea's ready, is kicking off for no reason. Well, the reason is because adults raising their voice in the past has triggered or caused significant harm or distress, and therefore the brain is reacting just like I threatened him, even though I didn't. Now, rationally, he may know he's not really threatening me, but the emotional brain is taking over, which may cause him to act in ways that we consider to be or feel are challenging. But it's, as I said right at the beginning, it could be because he's emotionally dysregulated, he's scared, he's coming from a position of absolute terror rather than being bad. Now, obviously, I use the example there of a younger child or a child that's experienced domestic abuse, and that could be, adolescence, for instance. But this is something that can happen throughout life. Whether it be somebody with mental health challenges or learning disabilities where they may not be able to communicate in a typical way, where these traumas may affect, because these traumas can happen at any time and they can then be re-experienced at any point in life. And I've come across it a lot in things like elderly care, where people have suppressed or repressed thoughts and emotions related to previous experiences, but now their brain is potentially being affected by certain conditions. Their ability to kind of keep the lid on that box is no longer there in the same way. And therefore, we're getting higher state of emotional arousal and emotional dysregulation, not from what's going on there and then, but from things that have happened in the past that are re-emerging in the person's brain based on triggers that are happening in the environment. The green room that wasn't actually the threat, just something associated with a bad thing that happened. Hopefully you found that a useful way of drawing it out. Obviously, there's a lot more information or a easier explanation when I haven't got visuals. I always find it difficult within my book, Targeting the Positive. But when I'm teaching about courses, we can often relate an awful lot of behavioral dysregulation or behavior that we find challenging over into the categories of a fight response, a flight response, a freeze response, or a submission or a fawn response. And you can see them mapped across. Somebody being controlling and aggressive and lying or demanding, it's a fight response. It's somebody being hypervigilant, hyper-anxious, struggling to sit still, struggling to focus, it's a potential flight response. Somebody who shuts off, disassociates, refuses to engage, refuses to communicate, we've got the freeze response. And then we've got the submissive, the masking, just pretending to be the charming child, pretending to be the perfect individual, pretending to be okay, but actually they're in this fawn response. I must pretend that I'm okay. I must pretend to be something so that you'll be a lower danger to me. Hopefully that makes sense as far as those 4 elements are concerned. But hopefully the idea of this is by changing our understanding that this person isn't acting this way because they're bad. They're doing it because they are scared. And by changing the main human drivers are love and fear. So if we recognize it's fear, how can we help them to feel safe rather than how can we punish them for behaving the wrong way? Hopefully that helps. Thanks for listening. Let me ask you a question. Do you ever find the pressures of supporting, teaching, or caring for someone else overwhelming and wish you had access to more support and information? The Able to Care podcast, in connection with Able Training, has created the ablehub.uk, where for less than the price of a coffee a week, you can access exclusive podcast content, resources, events, and over 45 certified online courses, covering topics like self-care, understanding dementia, neurodiversity, first aid, conflict management, financial advice, and so much more, with new content and courses being added each month. We are so confident that you will benefit from the Able Hub that we are offering 14 days access completely free of charge. No contract, cancel anytime. Become part of the ablehub.uk community and gain the support, knowledge and resources you deserve. Don't struggle alone. Be able. Find the link in the description.